My refutation is on Joshua Clockman's California farmers are negatively affected by today's economic protection laws. I say they're not negatively affected because other countries such as China have had these problems and they've increased. In the Vermont Journal of Environmental Law, Alex Wang states, the prioritization of economic development has produced a sustained period of impressive economic growth and an extensive reduction of poverty. Between 1978 and 2005, China's gross domestic product grew by an average of 9.4 per year, and China rose from 48th in the world in 1978 to become the world's fourth largest economy in 2005. Now, my opinion in gross domestic product, I believe, is an excellent indicator of improving quality of life. It's simply because it is a measure of the amount of work being done and the productivity going into and resulting from that work. The higher the GDP, the better the economy, and therefore the better quality of life. And now with China, work being so productive, they're advanced in technology and their lifespan is longer compared to America and its citizens. Joshua also states and talks about face down law, how it's a burden to farmers financially because the cheap way they did with their crops is they burned it. Joseph Atieno from Radio International talks about the positives to burning crops. He says the farmer sees that burning residues makes farming easier for them. Also, burning the crops control weeds and pests and improves yields in the season after burning them. But of course, cheaper is not always good. I think cheaper is bad because, for example, have you guys ever bought shoes in LA? If you buy shoes, I bought shoes in LA before. I thought it'd be cheaper and last me a couple. Well, it last me 2 weeks compared to buying Vans shoes or something. Last year. So cheaper is not always good. And some negative things to burning crop is it causes erosion, nutrient loss, and biodiversity loss. Also, if you burn crop, instead of burning crop, you can replenish it. Replenishing it, it allows for water, air, and nutrients to percolate easily down to the roots, thus creating healthy, vigorous crops. That means healthy for us to eat it. It's so much better. Nutrients are more better. Josh also talks about how protection laws are making prices of farm products go up, and he talks about how Mexico has no protection laws. But if you think about it, air pollution in Mexico is worse than ours. In the article about air toxins, it's by an unknown writer though. He says people exposed to air toxins and toxic air pollutants at sufficient concentrations and durations may have an increased chance of getting cancer or experiencing other health effects. He also states some toxic air pollutants, such as mercury, can deposit onto soils or surface waters, where they are taken up by plants and ingested by animals and are eventually magnified up through the food chain into humans. So if they have something wrong with them because of the plants, it goes into animals, it goes into us, we can eat. So with horrible pollutions in Mexico, since they're importing into America, they have worse air. It's all bad. Joshua also talks about the cap and trade law in bad how it's bad for farmers. It may be bad for farmers, but it's good for economy. In another article, Cap and Trade, Economic Impact, a writer by the name of Michael Levy states 2 reasons why it's good. First, it would reduce current uncertainty about the shape of the future greenhouse gas regulations. Uncertainty is a deterrent to investment. Passing cap and trade law legislation soon would thus help us unlock spending. Second, it would improve pressure to implement far clumsier regulations under the Clean Air Act, which was not designed for tackling the sort of broadly distributed and extraordinarily varied emissions sources that drive climate change. Using the Clean Air Act to regulate emissions would widely be far more expensive than the use of a cap and trade system. Anything that makes first path less likely then would be an economic plus. So in the end, I think farmers need to put more work into their soil and be healthier for us instead of being so cheap. Thank you.
All right, you label the main claim so we know what the argument is supposed to be about. And then you go into this argument about China and comparative gross domestic product, and I'm not sure how that applies to the issue that's being presented here. There's not really an explanation about what it all means. In fact, if China is one of those places that has fewer environmental restrictions than the United States does, this sounds like an advocacy for the opposite of what you would be taking the position. It sounds like it would be indirectly supporting the position of the advocate on this point. So you need a clear explanation about why you were talking about all of that information. When you get to something that does apply specifically to the advocate's point, the burning of the crops, I think that you've got, again, you cite information that seems to suggest that there's a benefit for it. Okay, that, of course, doesn't do you any good. It sounds like you're summarizing an argument for the advocate's position. And then you make a comparison on the, cheaper isn't always better. That talks about shoes, and I'm not sure that gets you very much. Apply it to this context, and I think it would be a little bit better. If you're talking about what's cheaper when it comes to handling 4,000 acres versus what's cheaper about the pair of shoes you're putting on the foot, I'm not sure that that's a very useful analogy that you're drawing there. And there's not really much. There's one argument that applies on this that says that the burning thing contributes to erosion, nutrition loss, and biodiversity issues, but I didn't hear a source citation on that. It's an assertion at this point, and you need to provide some evidence on that particular point. The argument about air pollution in Mexico, okay, this is going to be relevant if you can show that the air pollution in Mexico is a result of lax environmental regulations on agriculture. I think you need to be able to show that, and you don't really have any information on that particular point. General problems with air pollution, I think everybody agrees, is something that we want to watch out for, but how substantial is the agricultural contribution going to be, or would it be, if we didn't have the regulations that are in place now? You kind of have a defense of cap and trade, but the arguments in favor of cap and trade don't really address the issue about whether or not the environmental issues have an impact on the farmers. You basically say, well, forget whether it has an impact on the farmers, it's got an advantage on the economy in general. Somebody's going to get rich from the cap and trade things, and that's going to spur investment. But that doesn't deny the argument that it has a negative impact on the farmers that provide the kinds of food. You know what? Yeah, and just one other issue. We haven't talked about public speaking issues quite as much as we ought to. I'm going to be talking about delivery issues with my public speaking classes next week. The shirt probably doesn't help your credibility issues a lot, It's a little distracting, as a matter of fact. I kept thinking, Mickey, he's got 4 fingers. What is he doing?